Alright, so a massive update on the bump stock case. Basically, it went to the Supreme Court. There was two of them. And today they denied hearing both of them. So what does that mean? Now, understand, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal professional. And if you take legal advice from me, you're stealing. So I'm just going to give you my opinion on this. It's just talking points. It's to start a conversation. So let's get into it. Alright, so in 1984, the Supreme Court ruled that it's a case called Chevron, and then the ruling became known as Chevron deference. What it was is there was a oil factory. The EPA said that, hey, you know, the pollution standards, that's for the facility, the entire thing. Well, there was a bunch of environmentalists that were like, no, the law says structure, so each individual smokestack you have to apply those pollution regulations on. That's the way it needs to be interpreted. So it went up to the Supreme Court, the EPA, versus this environmental agency, in the Supreme Court, in one of the most ridiculously awful rulings ever, awarded the power to a bureaucratic agency to interpret the law and apply it basically how they see fit. So the Supreme Court gave bureaucratic agencies the power to basically make new laws. Because you could look at anything. You could look at the definition of a machine gun and be like, one pull of the trigger, well, if you don't actually lift your finger off of the trigger, that's going to count as a continuous pull, so therefore all semi-automatic firearms are machine guns. The bump stock case was specifically challenging Chevron deference, that the ATF did not have the power to make a bump stock a machine gun because that is not Congress's definition. Congress was very specific about what their definition was of a machine gun. It does not fit a bump stock. It could never fit a bump stock. The bump stock doesn't even have moving parts. How could that be a machine gun? Yes, there is the exception for auto sears for machine guns, but a bump stock doesn't meet any of those definitions. And they're basically saying that a bump stock is an auto sear because you're not lifting your finger. Yeah, the trigger's moving like a semi-auto, but the fact that you're not lifting your finger, therefore that is a machine gun. Basically the same exact thing with the rare breed triggers. Understand, the bump stock case was not a challenge against the NFA. That was a challenge specifically against Chevron deference. Well, that had made it up to the courts. Obviously, it went... don't chew me up if I'm wrong how this goes, but I believe it goes like district courts, and then your circuit courts, and then your Supreme Court, and it made it to the Supreme Court level, and today they denied both of them. So what exactly does that mean? Obviously, insert disclaimers here about the legal professional thing. From what I understand, what that means is now, because the Supreme Court denied hearing it, they have to use the decision of the lower court. So it had went through your criminal court. All the criminal courts decided the defendants were not guilty. Then the actual case against the EPA, that went up to appeals court. And the appeals court said, no, it's not a machine gun. And then it went to the on being. I forget how to pronounce it. It went up to that where you basically have a bunch of judges rule. And those judges rule that it is in fact a machine gun. And then it would have went up to the Supreme Court. And they would have heard it and made an ultimate decision. But since the Supreme Court denied hearing it, then it goes back to the en banc court system on what they ruled. And they said, yes, it is in fact a machine gun. So that's where we're at. So as of now, Chevron deference still stands. Now, the EPA case, that was EPA versus West Virginia. That did take a huge chunk out of Chevron deference, because in that case, the Supreme Court said that if Congress doesn't specifically tell you something, you can't veer out of that. But apparently, the ATF gets an exception carved out for them. Honestly, after the Bruin decision, I had a lot of hope in this. Now, does that mean that they're going to let Chevron deference stand? They may have another case that's going to handle that very thing, and that's why they threw those out. This way they could do another Chevron deference case or something that would encompass that. That's always a possibility. I don't think so, because so when the Bruin case was going to happen, there was a whole bunch of other cases that came up with it. The Supreme Court just put those on hold and said, wait, and then we'll decide on those in light of Bruin. Well, Bruin happened, and then they just remanded those cases back down. I think if that's what was going to happen, instead of just not hearing the case, they would have put it on hold. Again, I'm not a legal expert. I don't know a whole lot about the Supreme Court, but that's my interpretation of it. So, as far as I'm concerned right now, Supreme Court sent a message that yes, the ATF does have the power to create new laws, because that's essentially what Chevron deference is, and this would have been the case to stop them from arbitrarily determining things to be a machine gun. So what does that mean in the future? In the future, as of right now, all those things that are not, but they say is so, they stand. Like, again, the rear breech trigger. They said that's a machine gun because they didn't hear the bump stock case. That essentially means that's a machine gun. Same with like other tubes of metal. You guys get the gist. Basically, right now, they're not checking the ATF. I was really hoping they were going to check the ATF on this, but for whatever reason they did not. Hopefully it's in my little fairyland here, I guess. Hopefully they have another case that's basically going to cover that anyway, and that's why they didn't want to hear it. I don't know, we'll have to see. So yes, as of right now, in the middle of the night, say at 1 a.m., the ATF can arbitrarily decide something is a machine gun and go and arrest people. The next obvious question is, well, what about ex post facto? You can't do that. You can't just make up a law in the middle of the night and then charge everybody that broke the law before you even told them it was against the law. Well, what the ATF does is they're like, well, we didn't make up a new law. This law actually existed in 1934, so you've been guilty this whole time. We just didn't figure it out yet. So say, for example, tonight at midnight they decide that, oh, well, we're going to measure barrel length differently. So now all your 16.1 inch barrels are now considered 15 inches because of our new system of how we measure it. Then, yes, they could come and arrest you before you even knew about it. Or say they decided tonight at midnight that binary triggers now meet the definition of a machine gun. Even though they have an approval letter, it doesn't matter because that goes back to 1934. So you're not covered by ex post facto law. They could just decide, hey, tonight we're going to go and raid Foztech, we're going to seize their customer list, and we're going to show up at people's houses and start arresting people. They would totally get away with that because, again, the NFA was created in 1934, and they're saying that it's always been a part of the NFA. They just didn't fully understand the definition of a machine gun, but now they do, and you're in violation, and you've been in violation the whole time, and you should have known this because it's been around since 1934, so it's your fault we shot your dog, arrested your family, evicted you out of your house and threw you in jail. That's your fault, not ours. You should have known. So that's basically what's going on. No, ex post facto does not cover you at all when it comes to anything the ATF decides because, again, they're going back to 1934. So you've been in violation the whole time. They just didn't know it yet. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching my channel. If you like to help support the channel, got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Just by clicking on those links, even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for, just clicking on it and doing the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway, I'll kick back for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.